All right. So good afternoon, everyone. So let's continue from where we left off last week. Okay. So we are going to be referring to page 4 of your notes. There are a few questions over there under checkpoint 1. So let's go through some of the questions relatively quickly. So let's look at question number 4. The word equation for aerobic respiration is shown below. All right, carbohydrate plus oxygen plus carbon dioxide plus water and energy. What I would like you to take note of, okay, is the fact that this carbohydrate is referring to glucose, and this energy here is referring to a large amount of energy. So take note of that. All right. So therefore, what are the waste products? So what are your metabolic products? Therefore, your answer, if you know it, okay, is carbon dioxide and water, because we're talking about aerobic respiration. All right. Now, which gas is produced during aerobic respiration? I think this is quite clear cut. The gas is carbon dioxide. Now, muscles use oxygen in a reaction to release energy. So write a word equation for this reaction. So since we're talking about the usage of oxygen, we are referring to aerobic respiration. So all you have to do is then write down the word equation for aerobic respiration. So if you refer to your notes, then you would know that you will have to have glucose plus oxygen, giving you a carbon dioxide gas, water as a byproduct, and of course, a large amount of energy. You need to make reference to the word large amount of energy. All right. Now, if you find that I'm going too fast for you in this lecture, you can always just pause, rewind, and go back to the previous part that you require a little bit more time. Okay, so you learn to pace yourself. Let's move on. Let's move on to the bottom of page number 4. So let's have a look at question 3A. All right, now, aerobic respiration in plants is the same as that in humans. So write a word equation. So no brainer. I'm just going to put it over here. Let me try and remove this bar. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. All right. So let's go on to this question over here. Okay, a student uses hydrocarbonate indicator. Hydrogen carbon indicator, remember, is to test for the presence of CO2 in terms of the varied CO2 concentrations. Okay, so how different the CO2 concentrations actually are. So they are trying to investigate photosynthesis and respiration. Now, what some of you all need to take note of is that photosynthesis uses CO2, whereas respiration gives out CO2. So you're always talking about intake or intake of CO2 in the plant, and output. That means giving out of CO2. Okay, so over here in normal atmospheric conditions, the color will appear red. That means CO2 in is equals to CO2 out. Okay, if your CO2 is low, that means CO2 in is much more than CO2 out. And likewise, yellow, that means the concentration of carbon dioxide in the air is high, because CO2 given out is much more than taken in. Okay, so you get a different color. So they give you two different beakers over here, tube A and tube B. Okay. So now they tell you that tube A is kept in bright sunlight for 12 hours. So you may want to annotate A was in the sunlight for 12 hours. And the indicator was from red to purple. Now, purple means low CO2. Okay, whereas B was in the dark, and it changes from red to yellow. So the difference in the sunlight, although you may not have learned the chapter of photosynthesis, but you would definitely know in Sec 2, all right, that photosynthesis requires light. So since tube A is placed in the light, photosynthesis actually can take place, and in fact will be much more than respiration. So if it's much more than respiration, that means CO2 is taken in, okay, more than the amount of CO2 given out. That's why the CO2 in the solution is actually low, giving you the color of purple. Okay? Then if you look at tube B, all right, it was placed in the dark. So if it's placed in the dark, means no photosynthesis. The only reaction that can take place is a reaction of respiration. And the reaction of respiration means that more CO2 is given out as compared to CO2 taken in. So more CO2 is given out by the plant because it is only respiring, it is not photosynthesizing. So it's not using up any carbon dioxide. So if you were to explain, okay, the reactions, let me remove some of the annotations that is on the screen. All right. So if you were to explain it, then for tube A, you will say that more photosynthesis is taking place than respiration because of bright sunlight. Therefore, what is happening? Okay. Therefore, there is low carbon dioxide concentration. And that is why the color is actually purple, because purple is when CO2 concentration is very much lower. Okay. Whereas in tube B is the actual opposite. Since there's no photosynthesis, so only respiration is occurring. In fact, more respiration is occurring than photosynthesis, obviously, because photosynthesis does not take place in the dark. Therefore, more CO2 is given out and very little CO2 is taken in. That is why it changes to yellow, because the concentration of CO2 given out or put outside into the solution is actually much more. Okay, you may want to pause the video here so that you are able to write down your answers at the top of page 5. Once you are done, we will then move on to the next section. Okay, so anytime you need to pause your video to write down your answer, please make sure you do so. Right, so these are just the colors that have been shown to you. So this is purple. Purple when CO2 in the solution is much lower because more CO2 has been used up by the leaf for photosynthesis. Whereas when you get a yellow color solution, that's because there's more CO2 that is given out. And why is there more CO2 given out? Because respiration is happening more than photosynthesis, because the plant was actually placed in the dark. So there was no photosynthesis at all. Okay, 3A4, thank you very much. I hope that you have already completed your questions for checkpoint number 1. We are now going to move on. So we have already studied the first type of respiration, which is aerobic respiration. So let's just do a little recap. We know that respiration is a chemical process occurring inside the cell, something that we cannot see. That's why we say that respiration is very different from breathing, which is a physical exercise. Okay? So now we're going to move on to the second type of respiration, which is known as anaerobic. So you remember Misty taught you aerobic means aero in air. Anaero means anti-air. That means anaerobic respiration does not need the presence of air. Okay, so at any point of time, I've also mentioned if you need to stop the video to write down or to complete your notes, please make sure you just pause it. You can pause at any time. So let's move on. Right, so there's one particular question that I always ask the students to think about. What about sprinters? Now, sprinters, they run a short distance in a short period of time. That means they need to complete their 50 or their 100-meter race in less than 15 seconds. If they want to win the Olympic record, they will also have to complete it in less than 10 seconds. And if you think about it, 10 seconds is simply too short a time, okay, for you to take in as much oxygen and therefore allow you to carry out aerobic respiration. So if you can remember clearly last week, we spoke about so let me just go back again. We spoke last week that in aerobic respiration, oxygen and glucose are actually your limiting factors. You may want to write that down. So basically, if I control the concentration of oxygen and I limit the concentration of glucose, I'm basically limiting, or I am preventing my aerobic respiration from increasing much further. And why is there a limit to oxygen and why is there a limit to glucose? Simple, because there is always a limit to how fast and how fast your heart can beat and how fast you can breathe. We are all human beings. We are not robots. Therefore, we cannot always keep on increasing our heart rate. We cannot always keep on increasing our breathing rate. So there is like a maximum number of beats and a maximum number of breaths we can take per minute. All right. And because there is a maximum number of breaths and a number of beats, therefore there's a maximum amount of oxygen that is transported in our body. And that's why oxygen is a limiting reagent. So in chemistry, you know, anything that's a limiting reagent will cause a chemical reaction to be limited. Unless you change that ingredient or you change that reagent, the rate of reaction will not change. Okay, So let's go back to this. But before that, let me erase all this on screen. I'd like to just show you this video. Now, you may recognize one person from this video, and he's Usain Bolt. He was the then fastest person on earth. I'm not sure whether anybody has actually broken his world record, but let's just watch this particular video.
Set. Safa Paul ist der Schnellste aus den Blöcken. Jetzt kommt Gay. Und jetzt ist Usain Bolt nicht zu halten. Nein, er gewinnt. 9,58 Weltrekord. Ein Wahnsinn. Da denkst du dir, Peking ist nicht mehr zu toppen. Es ist zu toppen durch den Mann hier.
Okay, so you can see, right? The time that he took to run his sprint was like 9.53 seconds, and that's really very, very, very fast. So his thigh muscles probably need a lot of energy and almost immediately. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about anaerobic respiration, which is the release of small amounts of energy when glucose is broken down in the absence of oxygen. So take note, we are talking about the first difference already. A small amount of energy, that is the first difference as compared to aerobic respiration. The next difference, which is your 2D, is the fact that it's done in the absence of oxygen. Okay? And I would like you to take out your highlighter and highlight this particular statement. This occurs only when our body needs energy immediately. That means there is what we say in biology, there is a sudden demand. There is a sudden demand, and your body requires this sudden demand of energy almost immediately. And that's why you can't rely too much on aerobic, because aerobic requires time, because you need to supply oxygen. So anaerobic respiration, if I were to give an analogy, it's like a little bit like a loan shark. So if you need a lot of money and you need it in a short period of time, you won't go to the bank, because if you go to the bank, you have to fill up like different forms and you have to wait like 7 working days, or depending on how much money you borrow, you might have to wait for 2 or 3 months for them to approve your loan. But if you really need that money in a fast amount of, if you need it in a short period of time, you probably take the easy way out and ask a loan shark. So actually, anaerobic respiration is a little bit like a loan shark. And what is the drawback of borrowing money from a loan shark? Is the fact that they actually increase your interest, right? So you actually pay more than you can actually loan. So actually, anaerobic respiration also has its disadvantage, and we will find out what it is later on. So take note of the definition: small amount of energy when there is an absence of oxygen. So first thing you need to take note is point number 2. All right. Actually, our body likes to use aerobic respiration all the time, because aerobic respiration has got the most obvious benefit. It gives us a large amount of energy. So obviously, your body wants more energy, right? So it will always rely on aerobic. But sometimes our body needs energy immediately, and we don't have the luxury of providing oxygen in great amounts all the time, because there is a limit to how fast we can breathe and how fast our heart can actually beat per minute. So take, for example, in 10 seconds, I don't think your heart rate can increase from 75 beats per minute to 165 beats per minute, almost twice the amount in 10 seconds. It's not possible. So therefore, such situations are known to be vigorous muscular contractions. Please take note of the word vigorous and highlight this. So in your O levels, you need to say that it's only in vigorous muscular contractions in which your body actually relies very much on anaerobic respiration. There is an error here. This should be known as anaerobic respiration. Can you take note of that, please? So I ask you again, at the definition, please cancel the word aerobic and write anaerobic. I just realized there was a mistake. I apologize for that. Okay, so going back to point 3A, all right, so during vigorous muscular contractions, your muscles actually respire aerobically at a very high rate. They are trying to respire aerobically at the maximum rate. That's why you notice when you start to exercise, what's the first thing you start to do? Like dogs, we actually start to pant. right? And why do we pant? Because we are trying to get rid of the carbon dioxide that we are producing from aerobic respiration. We are also trying to breathe in as much oxygen at a faster rate. Please take note of all these comparative words. You need in your O levels to tell the examiner what's happening on a normal condition versus exercising. Now, normally, you are already respiring aerobically. But when you are exercising, you are respiring aerobically more. So you need to say that you take in oxygen more. You take in oxygen at a faster rate. You must make the comparison to normal condition. I think one thing that all Sec 4E students always make a mistake is they always say, oh, when we exercise, we respire aerobically. That's incorrect, because even when you don't exercise, you are already respiring aerobically. So take note of things like faster rate, more oxygen, get rid of more carbon dioxide. You need to take note of that. Besides panting, which is to breathe in faster, okay, you also realize that when you run your 2.4, your heartbeat per minute increases, right? That's because your heart wants to pump faster so that you can transport more oxygen around the body per minute. And why do you need more oxygen? Because again, you want your aerobic respiration to be at a faster rate, because your muscles are now contracting more than you are before exercise. Okay, so please box these 2 points up. It's very important. Put 3 stars next to this. So during vigorous muscular exercise like a 50 to 100 meter sprint, we summarize, you pant more. That means you breathe in more per unit time because you want to get rid of CO2. You want to take in oxygen at a faster rate because oxygen is required for increased aerobic respiration. Number 2, you also want to make your heart beat faster. And why do you want your heart to beat faster per unit time? So that you can send oxygen around the body to your contracting muscles that is contracting more, okay, at a faster rate compared to normal non-exercise conditions. Now, if you feel that you need to stop the lecture, think about what I've just said, process it, please do, and then you can go back and rewind if you need to re-listen to this part again. If not, I'm going to move on to page 6, okay? So to page 5, right at the bottom. Okay, so let's look at point number B. All right, so we already know that we want to increase our heart rate. We want to pant more because we want to take in more oxygen per unit time compared to normal conditions. But what did Miss Lee say earlier? We are not robots. And because we are not robots, there is what we consider to be a limit. That means there is so much that your heart can beat. There's also so much that you can breathe in faster. So there is always like a control, okay, or a limit to this increase in breathing and heart rate. Okay, there's only so much your heart rate can increase. There's only so much your breathing rate can increase. I don't think there's anyone in this world that can have a heartbeat of more than 195 beats per minute. Because if you do that, you most likely will probably die because your blood pressure will be too high. So there is no way you can increase your heartbeat to 200 beats per minute. It's not possible. And since there is a limit to your heartbeat, that means there's also a limit to how fast oxygen can be supplied. You may want to write that down, please. This limits oxygen supply and how fast oxygen travels to muscles. Which means in simple words, what this actually means is that O2 supply, all right, cannot meet O2 demand. If I were to draw this as a graph, it goes like this. This is my demand for oxygen, O2 demand, but this is how much oxygen I can supply, O2S, S stands for supply. And that would mean that I have this amount that I will never be able to meet. I will never be able to supply this extra amount of oxygen that my muscle cells require. Because why? my heartbeat will never be able to keep on increasing. My breathing rate will also never keep on increasing. So therefore, my oxygen supply will never meet the demand. It will never be equals to the demand. Okay, this is a very important point that you must take note of. So again, if you need to stop the video, please do and go back. So if let's say this vigorous muscular activity were to continue, I'm in trouble because my muscular contractions are so vigorous and so intense that I will never be able to have maximum aerobic respiration. And since I can never have maximum aerobic respiration, or my maximum aerobic respiration has been achieved, it will not be able to meet this demand of energy that I need. So what this means is that the oxygen supply is not enough for oxygen that your body requires. So there is a shortage. So your body is always in shortage of oxygen. And since your body is in shortage of oxygen, you are also in shortage of energy. That's why you cannot meet the demand for energy. Okay, so you are having two shortage. One, you're not enough oxygen because supply cannot meet the demand. You also shortage of energy because supply of energy cannot meet the demand for energy. So what happens? Then your body will say, hey, never mind, it's okay. I don't only have to use aerobic respiration. I can switch to anaerobic respiration, right? Because anaerobic respiration does not require oxygen. So I just need that extra little bit of energy to finish the race, and that is where anaerobic respiration comes in. Okay, so I'd like you to write this down on this particular set of notes, because there's one particular question that always comes out for the O levels, and they will always ask, what is the significance of anaerobic respiration? So what do you mean by significance? I think significance is, so since anaerobic respiration gives you like so little energy, right? Why do we even bother doing it, right? But why do we bother doing it? Because number one, precisely it does not need oxygen. And since it does not need oxygen, I'm able to still supply little bit of energy. And this little bit of energy will then be able to top up the amount of energy that I actually need for the entire race. So actually in the entire race, I am running on maximum aerobic respiration plus anaerobic respiration. Large amount of energy plus small amount of energy, so that my energy demand of my body can be met, can be achieved. That's what it means. But the drawback is, remember we said that the anaerobic respiration is like a loan shark, right? So what is the disadvantage of anaerobic respiration? This particular chemical, lactic acid, is produced. Okay, you may want to write this down. Lactic acid is actually produced. And lactic acid, being acidic, you know is not good for the body. So lactic acid can actually cause muscle pain or cramp and muscle tiredness. And that is the same kind of cramp that you experience in your thigh muscles, in your shin muscles after you run 2.4 kilometer, that kind of pain. So you imagine that kind of pain, you won't be able to continue running the race because your muscles are in pain. So the moment lactic acid is allowed to build up or accumulate in your body, you won't be able to continue the race. And that is why sprinters actually do not run a very long distance, because they do have lactic acid accumulation, and because of that, they cannot finish running a very, very long race, unlike marathoners. Okay, so since not enough oxygen is present, glucose is not broken down. Sorry, since no oxygen is present in anaerobic, glucose is not broken down completely. And since glucose is not broken down completely, that is why a small amount of energy is released, because you still have so much of glucose present, right? Carbon dioxide and water is not produced. And so what do you get? You get lactic acid, which is a chemical that, if it's allowed to accumulate, will cause a lot of muscle cramp and a lot of muscle fatigue, which is tiredness. Now, in the O levels, you must remember muscle cramp and tiredness are different. Being tired and being in pain are two different adjectives. So you must remember that your muscles are not only tired, they are also experiencing pain because of the accumulation of lactic acid. Okay, so we have actually seen a few things from our 3 slides that we are talking about. Number one, the definition of anaerobic. We have spoken about why anaerobic is so significant because of the limit to oxygen supply, the limit of energy supply. That is why we need to run anaerobic respiration to give us that small amount of energy. And since there is no oxygen present in anaerobic, your glucose molecule is not 100% converted to carbon dioxide and water. It is only a little bit converted, and that's why you have lactic acid plus small amount of energy. Okay, now to summarize this part, we are actually going to watch a video here, and then we will move on to the next part that is found on page 7.
When an athlete is running at full speed, the muscles can demand more oxygen than the body is able to provide. When this happens, the respiration reaction becomes anaerobic instead of aerobic. In the absence of enough oxygen, the body breaks down glucose into lactic acid instead of carbon dioxide and water. This anaerobic reaction releases energy, but not as much as aerobic respiration. At rest, the lactic acid level in Jackie's blood is tested by placing a small sample into a portable machine. With a reading of 1.0, the level is very low. If Jackie now sprints, the lactic acid level in her muscles will increase. Lactic acid is a mild poison, so it begins to hurt. When the build-up gets too high, she finds it too painful to run. Another spot of blood is all that's needed to measure the new lactic acid level. It's now much higher.
Okay, so from this video, you can see that actually our bodies all have like a standard consistent level of lactic acid. However, the lactic acid level is very low. And you saw that when that lady, Jackie, when she actually sprinted 400 meters around the track, you saw that there was an increased level of lactic acid, right? That means the body actually has increased levels of anaerobic respiration. Because in a sprint, there is a limit to heart rate, there's a limit to breathing rate. Therefore, there is a limit to how much energy your body can take from aerobic respiration. So your body will naturally have to rely on anaerobic respiration. Therefore, lactic acid is produced. Okay, so I just have to show you one more particular video.
Recall that aerobic respiration is the breakdown of glucose molecules in the presence of oxygen to release a large amount of energy. Carbon dioxide and water are also released during this reaction. During exercise, our muscle cells require more energy than when we are at rest. Although aerobic respiration is able to release a large amount of energy, it may not be enough to meet the energy demand of our muscle cells if we exercise vigorously. This is because the amount of oxygen that can be transported to our muscle cells is limited mainly by our breathing rate and our heart rate. As the amount of oxygen our muscle cells can receive is limited, this means that there is a maximum amount of energy that can be released by aerobic respiration. How do the muscle cells obtain more energy to meet the increased energy demand during vigorous exercise? This is when anaerobic respiration kicks in. Unlike aerobic respiration, anaerobic respiration can release energy by breaking down glucose without oxygen. As glucose molecules are only partially broken down without oxygen, only a small amount of energy will be released. Lactic acid is produced as a byproduct. So when we exercise vigorously, both aerobic and anaerobic respiration occur in our muscle cells. Anaerobic respiration provides the additional energy that our cells need. You may have noticed that in anaerobic respiration, instead of carbon dioxide and water, lactic acid is produced. In the past, it was thought that the buildup of lactic acid in the muscles causes muscle fatigue and soreness. However, research has shown that this is not caused by lactic acid. In fact, it is due to small tears in the muscle tissues that could occur during vigorous exercise. The buildup of lactic acid decreases the pH of our blood, which affects the functioning of our enzymes. The lactic acid is transported through the bloodstream to the liver to be converted back to glucose. Oxygen is needed for this process. The amount of oxygen needed to convert lactic acid back to glucose is known as an oxygen debt.
I hope that was actually useful to help to summarize whatever that we have learned. So we are now currently at page 7 of your page 6 at the bottom of your notes on point number 6. All right, so the word equation for anaerobic respiration is glucose being partially broken down to give you lactic acid and a small amount of energy. And why is it being partially broken down? Because it's done without the presence of oxygen. So what is important is probably take note of point number 7, that this small amount, although very small, it's not insignificant, because together with the large energy that has been produced by maximum aerobic respiration, your body can keep on exercising, therefore your muscles can keep on contracting. Okay, and since we have mentioned earlier that there is a limit to how much supply, so I will just draw this again on this screen. If you haven't, please take note that this is a graph that you need to take note of. Since your oxygen demand, since your oxygen demand is never met by your oxygen supply, there's always this amount over here that you don't meet, never meet. So it's not enough. Okay, since your body cannot supply enough oxygen for your muscles or for your muscles to keep on contracting via aerobic respiration, okay, it's very similar to why you even go to a bank or why you go to a loan shark. If you have sufficient money, you won't have to borrow anything, right? But because you borrow money, since now you are borrowing money, you are what we call suffering from a debt, DEBT. DEBT, you have a debt. Okay, so since your body cannot meet the oxygen supply, your body has insufficient oxygen, so you need to go and borrow energy from anaerobic respiration. We say that your muscles have what we consider to be an oxygen debt. So just like a money debt means you don't have enough money to supply. So oxygen debt, because you don't have enough oxygen to supply to meet the demand of your contracting muscles. That's why you have to go and see a loan shark, or that's why you have to borrow money from a bank. Okay, so why does your body need to rely on anaerobic respiration? Because your body doesn't have sufficient oxygen to respire by aerobic respiration even more. So what is the definition of oxygen debt? Actually, oxygen debt is the amount of oxygen that you need in extra, okay, to meet the demand. And since this demand is not met, you switch to anaerobic respiration, right? But anaerobic respiration actually supplies lactic acid. So this small amount over here, so this small amount over here, right, is your debt, right? And since you have a debt, you switch this to anaerobic. Correct? Because this amount you supply by aerobic, now you supply this amount by anaerobic, and anaerobic releases lactic acid. So therefore, we say that oxygen debt is the amount of oxygen required to remove this lactic acid because of anaerobic respiration. Okay? Right. So let's go on to page 7 of your notes. This is the last part already. All right. You may have noticed that immediately after running or after you finish your exercise, if you were to measure your breathing rate and even your heart rate, your breathing and your heart rate is still very high, right? I mean, after running 2.4, I don't think you will have a situation whereby, wow, suddenly from 135 beats per minute, your heart, immediately it goes back to 80 beats per minute. It's like it's as if you haven't run the race at all. I don't think that is actually possible, okay? So why is it your breathing rate and your heart rate is still relatively high until it goes back to normal? So actually what your body is trying to do is, let's go back to the analogy of, let's say you borrow money from a loan shark or you borrow money from a bank for your business. And once your business actually has profits, you need to pay back the bank, right? Or you need to pay back the loan shark because these are the people who loan you money in the first place. So since your body has an oxygen debt, you need to pay back this oxygen that you actually need. And where this paying back is actually taken from is after exercise. So after exercise, your body still needs this extra oxygen because it wants to get rid of lactic acid. And why must lactic acid be gotten rid of? Because lactic acid is a mild poison. It causes muscle cramp and muscle fatigue. Okay? So you can highlight that, please. So why is it after exercise, your breathing rate is still very high, your heart rate is still very high? Take note, this is a very common O-level question which you need to take note of. Please highlight, you need extra oxygen to get rid of lactic acid. Or you can just say, this oxygen basically is to repay your oxygen debt. Okay? So when you make profit from business, the money that you receive, you cannot say, wow, it's all my money, I'm rich, man. But you actually will have to say that, okay, now the loan shark gave me this much, the bank gave me this much, I need to return my loan. Then whatever that is balanced will be mine to keep. So this oxygen must then be given back to the body. That's why we say this extra oxygen after exercise is to repay oxygen debt. Then once you can say that it is to repay the oxygen debt, which is 1 mark, you must say that this oxygen is to get rid of the lactic acid that has accumulated. So what do? Your body does this by a few ways. First, your body will breathe deeply. Breathing deeply means you increase the volume that you take in. Also have to breathe faster, okay, because you want to take in extra oxygen. Next, you also have to have a faster rate for your heartbeat. So your faster heart rate is to transport oxygen from the lungs to your liver. Okay, because why does it go to your liver? Because your blood will actually transport lactic acid from the muscles, okay, and will transport it to the liver. All right, so your extra heart rate is to increase circulation in the body so that blood can transport oxygen to your muscles faster, oxygen to your liver faster, and then your blood can also help to remove lactic acid from your muscles faster as well to go to the liver. Next thing, you also have deeper and faster breathing. Okay, why must you have deeper and faster? Remember, deeper and faster are different. Deeper means how much you breathe in. Faster is panting, how many breaths per minute. So both must happen at the same time. You must take in more and you must take in more faster per unit time. Okay, because you want to increase oxygen taken in, because remember, you want to repay your oxygen debt. So you want to take in this extra oxygen which you didn't have at first during the exercise. That's why you have oxygen debt. Now that the exercise has stopped, okay, you can take in extra oxygen to help to repay this debt by removing lactic acid from the muscles. Okay, once you are able to remove your lactic acid, we say that your oxygen debt has been repaid. So you may ask, so teacher, we bring the lactic acid to the liver for what? Your liver will actually use the oxygen that you take in extra after exercise to convert lactic acid back to glucose and then allow it to go through aerobic respiration to release extra energy again for the contracting muscles. Okay? Right. So just a last point to take note that is found at the bottom of page 7. All right. That actually during a sprint or a short distance race, all athletes actually receive energy majority from anaerobic respiration, because you take note that actually a lot of energy is required in a short period of time. So when you see these blue boxes, please take out your highlighter or a different colored pen if you don't have one to circle the important keywords. So since in a short period of time you need a lot of energy, all right, the oxygen supply, because of the limit of your breathing and your heart rate, is not enough. okay, in that short period of time, like in 10 seconds, 15 seconds, definitely you cannot supply maximum oxygen. Okay, it's not possible. So therefore, there is also a limit to how fast your aerobic respiration can take place. So that is why the muscles will then have to rely a lot on anaerobic respiration. Okay, so you may want to take note of this box found at the bottom of page 7. Okay, so I believe we have covered quite a lot of things on anaerobic respiration. Just would like to let you know that anaerobic respiration is a major core topic in the O levels. So you will need to go and look at the definition of anaerobic respiration. You will also have to ask yourself, when does your muscles actually rely on anaerobic respiration? Why do your muscles require anaerobic respiration even if it produces a small amount of energy? Is this small amount of energy actually significant? Okay, why is it significant? And how come our body actually has an oxygen debt? Okay, and how does your body actually get rid of this oxygen debt in the long run? Okay, so take note of these 4 very important key points now that we have come to the end of our anaerobic lecture. And also, please don't forget of what aerobic respiration is. This 6.1 is very crucial, and it will definitely be part of your WA1 when you return, okay, in 2024. Now, for the remaining part of the lesson, I think you still have about maybe 10 minutes. You may want to look through checkpoint 2 that is found on page 8, 9, 10, and 11. If you don't have time to complete that, please make sure that you take pictures of all your notes that you have completed today, okay, from page 4 all the way to page 7, okay? Show it to me via WhatsApp personally, please. I expect to see all your pictures given to me. Page 8 all the way to page 11 will be holiday homework. So I expect you to complete that, okay? And you can bring your completed notes in 2024. All right, so that's end for today's lecture. At any point of time, please stop, pace yourself, go back, okay? Rewind Miss Lee and listen to me again if you need any help. All right, so I'll say goodbye to you and I'll see you again next year. Have a good holiday, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I'll see you in 2024. Bye-bye.